You think you know what isolation feels like until you're standing in the middle of 2.3 million acres of wilderness, staring at evidence that suggests someone vanished into thin air. My name is Jake Martinez, and I've been a search and rescue coordinator for the National Forest Service for 12 years. In that time, I've seen cases that defy explanation, patterns that make no sense, and disappearances that violate everything we know about how people get lost in the wilderness. What I'm about to share with you are 3 cases from my files, cases that the Forest Service would prefer remained classified. But after what happened during my final search operation, I can't stay silent anymore. These stories need to be told. Sarah Chen was a 28-year-old software engineer from Seattle who disappeared in Olympic National Forest on October 15, 2021. She was an experienced hiker, well-prepared, and following a popular trail that hundreds of people use every month. What makes Sarah's case disturbing isn't just that we never found her. It's the evidence we discovered that suggests she encountered something in those woods that shouldn't exist. Sarah had been hiking the Sol Duc River Trail, a moderate 8-mile round trip that leads to some spectacular waterfalls. She'd checked in with the ranger station that morning, showing her permits and discussing her planned route. The rangers noted that she was well-equipped, carrying proper gear, emergency supplies, and a GPS device with an emergency beacon. She was supposed to complete the hike and return to her campsite by 6 p.m. When she didn't show up by midnight, her camping neighbors reported her missing. I arrived at the search staging area at first light, coordinating a team of 12 SAR volunteers and 2 tracking dogs. The Sol Duc Trail is straightforward. There aren't many places to get off route, and the terrain, while challenging in spots, isn't dangerous for an experienced hiker. We found Sarah's backpack at mile marker 4.2, right where the trail crosses a small creek. The pack was sitting upright on a boulder, positioned as if someone had carefully placed it there. This was our first red flag. When hikers get into trouble, injury, weather, wildlife encounter, they don't neatly arrange their gear. They drop it, abandon it, or use it for emergency purposes. Inside the backpack, everything was accounted for: food, water, rain gear, first aid kit, even her wallet and phone. The GPS device showed her last recorded position as exactly where we found the pack. But here's what made no sense. The emergency beacon hadn't been activated, and her phone showed no attempt to call for help. The tracking dogs picked up Sarah's scent at the backpack location, but lost it immediately. Not gradually, like a trail that grows faint over distance. They lost it completely, as if Sarah had simply vanished from that spot. We expanded the search radius, bringing in additional teams and a helicopter with thermal imaging. For 3 days, we covered every inch of terrain within a 10-mile radius of where the backpack was found. Nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no signs of struggle, no indication of which direction she might have gone. On the 4th day, we made a discovery that changed everything. One of our volunteers, Maria Santos, found footprints in a muddy area about half a mile from the trail. But these weren't Sarah's footprints. We'd taken impressions of her boots from her campsite. These prints were much larger, barefoot, and they showed anatomical features that didn't match human feet. The prints were approximately 18 inches long, with 5 toes, but the proportions were all wrong. The toes were too long, the arch too pronounced, and there were what appeared to be claw marks at the tips. Most disturbing of all, the stride length between prints was nearly 8 feet, far beyond human capability. I've seen bear tracks, and these weren't made by any known animal. The prints were definitely bipedal, showing the alternating left-right pattern of two-legged locomotion. But whatever made them was much larger and stronger than any human. We followed the track for about 200 yards before it disappeared onto rocky terrain. But in that 200 yards, we found something that made my blood run cold. One of Sarah's hiking socks, torn and muddy, caught on a branch about 10 feet off the ground. 10 feet. There was no way Sarah could have gotten her sock that high unless something had carried her. We brought in FBI forensics specialists, who confirmed that the sock belonged to Sarah and showed evidence of being forcibly removed. DNA analysis revealed Sarah's blood on the fabric, along with an unknown biological material that didn't match any species in their database. The official report classified Sarah Chen as a missing person, presumed dead due to wildlife encounter. But I know what we really found in those woods, and it wasn't a bear or cougar. 3 months later, I received an anonymous package at my office. Inside was a disposable camera with 23 photos. 22 showed normal forest scenes: trees, rocks, streams. The 23rd photo showed Sarah Chen. She was alive in the photo, but something was very wrong. She appeared to be in some kind of cave or underground chamber, sitting against a rock wall. Her expression was vacant, almost drugged, and she was wearing crude clothing made from animal skins. But the most disturbing detail was what surrounded her in the photo. Other people. At least 6 other individuals, all wearing the same primitive clothing, all with that same vacant expression. And standing behind them was a figure that made me understand why Sarah's case could never be officially solved. It was humanoid, but not human. Nearly 8 feet tall, covered in coarse hair, with elongated limbs, and a face that was disturbingly close to human, but fundamentally wrong. It was looking directly at the camera, and its eyes showed an intelligence that was far too advanced for any known primate. I tried to trace the package, but it had been mailed from a post office in a town that doesn't exist. The return address was fake, and the Postal Service had no record of how the package entered their system. 6 months after receiving the photos, I had a dream that felt more like a memory. In the dream, I was standing in the forest where we'd found Sarah's backpack. A voice spoke to me. Not heard, but somehow communicated directly into my mind. It told me that Sarah was needed, and that she was adapting well to her new purpose. The voice explained that they had been taking people from the forests for generations, selecting individuals who met certain criteria: intelligence, physical fitness, genetic compatibility. The selected people were kept in underground communities, their memories altered, their lives repurposed for breeding and labor. When I woke up, I found mud on my boots and pine needles in my hair, though I had no memory of leaving my house that night. I never worked another search in Olympic National Forest. In July 2019, the Morrison family, David, Lisa, and their 2 children, ages 8 and 10, disappeared during a camping trip in Yellowstone National Park. What makes this case particularly disturbing is that according to multiple witnesses and photographic evidence, the Morrison family was never at Yellowstone at all. Yet we have 4 missing person reports, extensive search records, and physical evidence of their presence in the park. The Morrisons had reserved campsite number 47 at Madison Campground for a week-long family vacation. They checked in on July 10th, with the park ranger noting a family of 4 with a blue Toyota Highlander and standard camping equipment. The ranger, Tom Bradley, remembered them specifically because the youngest child, Emma, was fascinated by his ranger badge and asked dozens of questions about park wildlife. Other campers reported seeing the Morrison family over the next 3 days. They were described as a typical family enjoying their vacation, hiking during the day, cooking meals at their campsite, participating in ranger-led evening programs. On July 13th, the family failed to attend a scheduled guided tour they had signed up for. When park staff checked their campsite, they found the family's tent, camping gear, and vehicle, but no sign of the family themselves. This is where the case becomes impossible to explain. When we began investigating the disappearance, we discovered that David and Lisa Morrison had died in a car accident in Denver 3 months before their supposed camping trip. Their children had been placed in foster care immediately after the accident. The real Morrison family could not have been at Yellowstone because half of them were dead and buried, and the other half were 500 miles away in the Colorado child welfare system. But we had physical evidence of their presence. The campsite registration was signed in David Morrison's handwriting, verified by forensic analysis against documents from his workplace. The credit card used for park fees belonged to David Morrison and showed activity during the dates in question, despite the fact that the account had been closed after his death. Most unsettling of all, we had photographs. Multiple tourists had taken pictures that included the Morrison family in the background. Professional photographers who had been documenting park wildlife captured the family in several shots. All of these photos showed the same 4 people: a man, woman, and 2 children matching the exact descriptions of the Morrison family. But facial recognition analysis revealed something impossible. The faces in the photographs weren't quite right. They matched the Morrison family's features approximately 85%, as if someone had created imperfect copies of the real people. The camping equipment left behind showed signs of use, but when we tested the items for DNA, we found no human genetic material. Not David's DNA, not Lisa's, not the children's, nothing. The tent showed wear patterns consistent with 3 days of occupation, but no biological evidence that humans had ever been inside it. Local wildlife cameras captured footage of the Morrison family walking park trails on July 11th and 12th. But digital analysis revealed anomalies in the footage, inconsistencies in lighting, shadows that fell in the wrong directions, and movement patterns that didn't quite match normal human locomotion. It was as if something had created perfect enough replicas of the Morrison family to fool casual observation, but the replicas weren't sophisticated enough to fool detailed forensic examination. During our investigation, we interviewed Tom Bradley, the ranger who had checked the family in. When we showed him photos of the real Morrison family, he insisted they were the same people he had met. But as the interview continued, his certainty began to waver. "Now that you mention it," he said, "there was something off about them." The father kept asking questions about park security, how often rangers patrolled remote areas, where the surveillance cameras were located, how long it took search teams to respond to missing person reports. At the time, I thought he was just being safety conscious, but looking back... Tom paused, his expression troubled. And the kids never blinked. I spent 20 minutes talking to that little girl about park animals, and I don't think I ever saw her blink once. We expanded our investigation to include other national parks, looking for similar cases of impossible disappearances. What we found was a pattern of fake families appearing at remote locations, staying just long enough to establish their presence, then vanishing without a trace. In each case, the families consisted of people who had died months or years earlier. In each case, physical evidence confirmed their presence, but forensic analysis revealed the same anomalies. No DNA, inconsistent photographic evidence, witness reports of subtly wrong behavior. The pattern suggested that something was using the identities of dead people to conduct reconnaissance of our national parks, studying our security procedures and search protocols. But for what purpose? The answer came during my final case, the one that ended my career with the Forest Service. But before I tell you about that case, you need to understand something. The Morrison family is still out there. Not the real Morrisons, they're dead and buried. But the replicas, the things that impersonated them at Yellowstone, are still active. Last month, I received a call from a park ranger in Grand Canyon National Park. A family matching the Morrison description had checked into a remote campsite. The ranger had read about our case and was calling to alert us. By the time a response team reached the campsite, the Morrisons were gone. But they left behind something new, a message carved into a picnic table. We know you're watching. We're watching too. Whatever created those replicas is still out there, still studying us, still preparing for something. And now they know we're aware of them. My final case began on September 3rd, 2022, when 12 members of a university geology field study group disappeared in the Cascade Range. What started as a routine search and rescue operation became something that challenged everything I thought I knew about reality. This case is why I no longer work for the Forest Service, and why I'm sharing these stories now. The University of Washington Geology Department had been conducting annual field studies in the North Cascades for over 20 years. Professor Elena Rodriguez had led dozens of these expeditions without incident. The students were all advanced undergraduates, experienced in wilderness safety and outdoor survival. The group was studying glacial formations in a remote area accessible only by helicopter. They were dropped off at a research camp on August 30th with supplies for 10 days and radio equipment for daily check-ins. The extraction was scheduled for September 8th. The group maintained regular radio contact for 3 days. Their reports were routine: weather conditions, research progress, sample collection activities. On September 2nd, Professor Rodriguez reported that they had discovered some unusual geological formations and requested permission to extend their stay by 2 days to conduct additional research. That was the last communication we received. When the helicopter arrived for the rescheduled pickup on September 10th, they found the camp abandoned. All equipment was present, including radios, GPS devices, and emergency beacons. Food supplies were untouched. Personal belongings were neatly arranged in the tents, as if the occupants had simply vanished mid-activity. I was assigned as lead coordinator for the search operation. We deployed every resource available: ground teams, helicopters, thermal imaging, search dogs, even satellite reconnaissance. The search area was expanded daily as we found no trace of the missing group. On the 4th day of searching, we made our first disturbing discovery. One of our ground teams found Professor Rodriguez's field notebook in a clearing about 2 miles from the base camp. The notebook contained detailed observations about their research, but the final entries were increasingly erratic and disturbing. September 1st entry: discovered cave system not shown on geological surveys. Formations inside don't match regional characteristics. Students excited about potential discovery. September 2nd entry: cave extends much deeper than initially thought. Found artificial structures inside. Stonework, possibly ancient. Native American origin? No tribal records indicate settlements in this area. September 3rd entry: strange acoustic properties in deeper chambers. Voices seem to echo differently, sometimes sounding like they're coming from multiple directions. Students reporting unusual dreams. September 4th entry: this is impossible. The cave system extends for miles underground, connecting to other cave networks across the region. Some chambers show signs of recent use, Fresh food, modern equipment. Someone else is down there. September 5th entry. We need to leave immediately. The others disagree. They say we're being invited deeper, that we're close to understanding something important. I think something is influencing their judgment. September 6th entry. I was wrong about everything. They're not trying to harm us. They're trying to help us understand. The surface world is ending. Down here we can be preserved. We can become something better. The final entry was written in a different handwriting. Dr. Rodriguez has joined us willingly. The surface team will be here soon. We are prepared. Surface team. They knew we were coming. I called for immediate backup and ordered our ground teams to establish a defensive perimeter around the area where the notebook was found. Whatever was happening in those caves, we needed to approach it with extreme caution. That night, as we prepared for the cave operation, something approached our base camp. I was reviewing search maps when our perimeter guards reported movement in the tree line. Multiple figures moving silently through the forest, surrounding our position. We activated night vision equipment and saw them clearly. 12 people matching the descriptions of the missing geology students. But something was wrong with how they moved. They walked in perfect unison, like a military formation, but their movements were too fluid, too coordinated. When one stepped over a log, all 12 stepped in exactly the same manner. When one turned to look in our direction, all 12 heads turned at precisely the same angle. Professor Rodriguez, I called out through our megaphone. This is search and rescue. Please identify yourself and approach slowly. The figures stopped moving. All 12 turned to face our camp directly. Then, in perfect unison, they spoke. Jake Martinez. We have been waiting for you. They knew my name. Somehow, these missing students knew who I was. We need to talk, they continued, their voices eerily synchronized. What you call disappearances, we call recruitment. What you call missing, we call found. I ordered my team to maintain defensive positions while I tried to establish communication with the figures. Professor Rodriguez, are you and your students safe? Do you need medical assistance? Safety is relative, Jake Martinez. We are safer now than we have ever been. We have found the truth about what lives beneath the surface, and we have been invited to join them. One of the figures stepped forward, a young woman matching the description of Sarah Kim, one of the missing students. But when she spoke, her voice was different, older, carrying an authority that no college student should possess. Your species stands at the edge of extinction, she said. Climate change, resource depletion, social collapse. The surface world has perhaps 50 years before total ecological failure. But below ground, in the deep places your kind has forgotten, there is another way. What are you talking about? I asked. We are the caretakers of an ancient civilization that learned to survive by adapting rather than consuming. They have been watching your kind for centuries, waiting for the right moment to offer salvation. That moment has come. The figure gestured toward the forest behind her. Your missing persons reports, they are not disappearances. They are selections. Individuals with the right genetic markers, the right psychological profiles, the right potential for adaptation are chosen to join the underground communities. Sarah Chen. The Morrison family. Dozens of other cases I'd worked over the years. They weren't random disappearances. They were systematic recruitment for something living beneath our national forests. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you have been selected, Jake Martinez. Your 12 years of search and rescue work, your knowledge of wilderness areas, your leadership abilities, you are exactly what the deep communities need. That's when I understood the true horror of what was happening. This wasn't just about recruiting random hikers and campers. Whatever lived in the underground civilization was systematically identifying and acquiring specific individuals with useful skills. They weren't just taking people, they were building something. "The choice is yours," the Sarah Kim figure continued. "Join us willingly, and you will help save the remnants of humanity in the world to come. Refuse, and you will remain on the surface to witness the end of everything you've ever known." I looked around at my team, experienced search and rescue professionals, good people who trusted my leadership. What about my team? They were not selected. But they will not be harmed if they do not interfere. The 12 figures began moving closer to our camp, maintaining their unnatural synchronization. As they approached, I could see that their eyes had changed. Instead of normal human irises, they showed a reflective quality, like the eyes of nocturnal animals. "You have 1 hour to decide," they said in unison. "We will return for your answer." The figures disappeared into the forest as silently as they had appeared, leaving my team and me alone with an impossible choice. I spent that hour researching everything I could find about the missing persons cases in our region. Using satellite internet, I accessed classified Forest Service databases and found patterns I'd never noticed before. Over the past 50 years, nearly 3,000 people had vanished in national forests under circumstances similar to what I'd been investigating. But the disappearances weren't random. They followed a clear selection criteria. Scientists, engineers, medical professionals, teachers, skilled craftspeople, military personnel. Someone was building a civilization underground, and they were recruiting the surface world's most capable individuals to populate it. When the hour was up, the 12 figures returned. But this time, they weren't alone. Behind them stood dozens of other people, missing persons from cases stretching back years. I recognized faces from FBI, missing persons bulletins, from cold case files, from search operations I'd participated in throughout my career. They were all alive, all watching me with those same reflective eyes, waiting for my decision. "I need more time," I said. "Time is the one resource we cannot spare," replied the Professor Rodriguez figure. "The surface world's collapse has accelerated beyond our projections. The selection process must be completed within the next 5 years. How many more people will you take?" "As many as necessary to ensure the survival of human knowledge and capability." Your national parks are perfect recruitment grounds, isolated areas where disappearances can be attributed to natural causes, far from urban surveillance systems. I realized that every national forest, every remote wilderness area in the country was probably being used as a hunting ground for this underground recruitment operation. Thousands of square miles of territory where people could vanish without trace, their disappearances blamed on bears, getting lost, falling into ravines. What happens if I refuse? You return to your work, file your reports, and pretend this conversation never happened. In 50 years, when the surface world collapses, you will understand that you chose extinction over evolution. But I knew I couldn't just walk away. Too many people were counting on me to find their missing loved ones, not knowing that those people had been recruited into something beyond normal human understanding. "I need to see it," I said. "I need to see these underground communities before I make my decision." The figures exchanged glances, the first time they had broken their synchronization. After a moment, Professor Rodriguez stepped forward. "Very few surface dwellers have been shown the deep places and allowed to return," she said. "But your selection profile indicates you may be suitable for limited exposure." They led me away from the camp, deeper into the forest than any of our search grids had covered. My team wanted to follow, but I ordered them to maintain position and wait for my return. If I didn't come back within 24 hours, they were to evacuate immediately and report everything to federal authorities. The journey to the entrance took 3 hours of hiking through increasingly difficult terrain. The trees grew larger and older as we climbed, until we were walking through groves of ancient cedars that must have been growing for thousands of years. The entrance to the underground civilization was hidden in a rock formation that looked completely natural. Only when we were within 50 feet did I notice the subtle signs of artificial construction. Stones fitted together too precisely, drainage channels carved too smoothly, pathways that followed geometric patterns rather than natural erosion. The entrance itself was a narrow cave opening, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. But once inside, the space opened into a vast underground chamber that defied geological explanation. The chamber was lit by some form of bioluminescent organism growing on the walls and ceiling, providing a soft blue-green glow that was surprisingly bright. The space was enormous, easily the size of several football fields, with a domed ceiling that rose at least 200 feet overhead. And it was occupied. Hundreds of people moved through the chamber, engaged in various activities. I saw workshops where individuals were crafting tools and equipment using both primitive and advanced techniques. Gardens where food was being grown under artificial lighting systems. Areas that appeared to be schools or training facilities where groups gathered around instructors. But these weren't primitive cave dwellers. The technology I saw was sophisticated, combining elements of modern engineering with techniques I didn't recognize. Solar panels and wind generators powered electrical systems, but they were integrated with biological components that seemed to be living organisms modified for specific purposes. This is one of 47 communities across North America, Professor Rodriguez explained. Similar networks exist on every continent. We have been preparing for surface world collapse for over 2 centuries. I walked through the community, observing people who had supposedly died or disappeared over the past several decades. They all showed the same physical modifications: the reflective eyes, enhanced physical coordination, and what appeared to be improved health and longevity. The adaptation process takes approximately 6 months, Rodriguez continued. Neural pathways are optimized, physical systems are enhanced, psychological conditioning removes most surface world attachments. The result is a human being better suited for long-term survival in post-collapse conditions. You're talking about brainwashing, I said. We prefer to think of it as educational upgrading. Surface world humans are conditioned for short-term thinking, individual competition, resource consumption. Deep world humans are optimized for long-term survival, community cooperation, sustainable resource management. I spent 6 hours in the underground community, observing their society and trying to understand what I was being offered. The technology was impressive, the social organization seemed efficient, and the people appeared healthy and content. But they weren't entirely human anymore. Whatever process they had undergone had changed them in fundamental ways. They moved with perfect coordination when working together, seemed to communicate without speaking, and showed no emotional reactions to seeing a surface dweller in their community. They had solved the problem of human survival, but at the cost of human individuality. When it came time to return to the surface, I was escorted by a different group, people I didn't recognize from any missing persons cases. These were the original inhabitants of the deep communities, the descendants of whatever ancient civilization had first created this underground network. They were humanoid, but clearly not human. Taller, with elongated limbs and faces that were subtly wrong in the same way I'd noticed in photographs of the fake Morrison family. They moved with fluid grace and communicated primarily through some form of telepathy. One of them spoke to me as we approached the surface. "Your species has great potential, but you are destroying your own habitat. We offer a path to survival, but it requires abandoning the surface world completely. Few of your kind are psychologically capable of making this choice. How long have you been taking people? We have been selecting suitable individuals for preservation since your civilization began developing industrial technology. The process has accelerated as your ecological collapse has become inevitable. What about the families, the people who are left behind wondering what happened to their loved ones? Individual attachment is a luxury your species can no longer afford. In the deep communities, genetic material is preserved, knowledge is maintained, capability is sustained. These are the priorities for long-term survival." When I emerged from the cave system, dawn was breaking over the forest. My team was waiting exactly where I had left them, though they reported that I had been gone for over 30 hours, not the 12 hours it had felt like underground. I had a choice to make: return to the surface world, continue my work, and pretend none of this had happened, or join the deep communities and help preserve human knowledge and capability for whatever came after the collapse. I chose the surface world, but that choice came with conditions. I was allowed to return only because the deep communities believed I would eventually change my mind. They were convinced that surface world collapse would happen soon enough, that I would voluntarily seek them out when civilization began to fail. In the meantime, they wanted me to continue my work, to keep detailed records of missing persons cases, to identify other potential recruits who might be suitable for selection. I was released, but I was also recruited. Whether I liked it or not, I was now working for the deep communities. That's why I'm telling you these stories, not because I want to expose a conspiracy or warn people away from national forests, but because I want you to understand what's coming. The deep communities are real. The selection process is ongoing. Thousands of people have already been recruited, and thousands more will follow. Our national parks and forests are hunting grounds for an underground civilization that is preparing for the end of the surface world. And based on everything I've seen, the climate data, the resource depletion projections, the social instability indicators, they may be right about the timeline. If you're reading this, you might be selected too. The deep communities monitor internet activity, identify individuals with useful skills or knowledge, track people who show interest in stories like these. So ask yourself, when the surface world begins to collapse, when the systems we depend on start to fail, when civilization begins to break down, would you choose extinction or would you choose evolution? The deep communities are patient. They've been waiting for centuries, and they can wait a little longer. But not much longer.